asking her some questions. So first, where and when were you born?
I was born in New Jersey in 1969.
Okay, and what were you doing before you entered the service?
I entered the service right out of high school. I had an ROTC scholarship, so I went to college and got commissioned the day before I graduated from college.
Okay, which branch of the military do you serve?
I am in the Army.
Why did you choose that specific branch of the military?
I was mercenary. I chose the Army because they gave me the most money for college.
Okay. In your early days of training, do you recall any of your instructors? And if so, what were they like?
I recall my initial instructors. I had a classroom instructor. His name was Major Phil. And he used to get up in front of us and he said, the most important thing is your family. If you can take care of your family, you can do anything. And he stressed family. I also had a non-commissioned officer that I remember scared the bejesus out of me and would make me do push-ups every time I screwed up. And I grew up now and I still have flashbacks to that sometimes.
How did you adapt to military life, including the physical regimen, barracks, food, and then the social life?
Military life was an adjustment. I was in college. I went to a 4-year school and did ROTC through school, but it was like a club. It was a couple afternoons a week, and it wasn't until I went to my basic camp the summer between my junior and senior year that I got a full taste of what the military was like. I didn't eat as much because we had to do pull-ups before we went into the mess hall for every meal, and I didn't do very many pull-ups, so I didn't get to eat a lot. Socially, it was, initially, everyone was sizing each other up. I was a group of officer candidates that I went to basic camp with, and everyone was more concerned about getting out of camp alive and surviving the summer than making lifelong best friends. So it was alliances rather than friendships.
Okay, kind of going off of that, did you make any other type of long-term friendships from the people you were serving with? And if so, what were they like?
Once I got on active duty, when I got out of school, my first duty assignment, I was active duty with the 3rd Armor Regiment, Cavalry Regiment out of Fort Bliss, Texas. I was stationed there for 3 years, and some of the friends that I made there have been lifelong friends. The one specifically, one of the non-commissioned officers that I work with, his name was Sergeant First Class Taste. I was fresh out of school and a brand new lieutenant, and officers get eaten alive. And when they tell you that new lieutenants have it rough, it's true. They get out of college thinking they know everything, and they're surrounded by career military, and they don't want to listen to you. And I walked into my very first unit, and this huge, huge African-American man, skin as dark as night, he looked at me, and he had that 1,000-meter stare perfected, and he came up to me, and he said, Lieutenant Frederick, MWTSM. And I went through all the acronyms that I learned in my training. I'm thinking, MWTSM, mission, war. I couldn't figure it out. And eventually I just had that deer in the headlight look, and he looked at me and he said, that's a man with a serious mission. And I fired right back at him, and I said, nice to meet you, Sergeant Pace, MWTSM. I'm Lieutenant Frederick, CIC. And you could tell that kind of caught him by surprise. And he looked at me, and I said, I'm chick in charge. I was one of three female officers in a regiment of 500, so I could get away with saying something like that. And we still exchange emails and Christmas cards to this day.
Kind of going off of what you said, how do you think your experience has been different since you're a female in the military?
The military is definitely an old boys club. Women do have it hard. Women are in the minority. The Army does have a greater percentage of women in it I think the Air Force has a comparable number of women, but it's still maybe like 1 in 5 are female as opposed to male. I have had opportunities because I am a female. They try to make it easier, trying to make things better for women in the military. So there have been opportunities that I've gotten just because I am a woman. But then there have also been things I've been closed out of, not not by regulation or by rules, but because the old boys club has kicked in and I'm not one of the old boys.
Okay. Did you ever have any trouble going from like your military life to your personal life and readjusting between the two?
I have been fortunate. I've never deployed overseas, so I've always had to balance military and personal life. And I mean, you can vouch for this. I've come home sometimes and snapped because I'm still in Army mode and commander mode as opposed to mom mode. But one of the tricky things that soldiers who have deployed face, when soldiers are deployed, they have one job, and that is their job. Their job is to stay alive and complete their mission, and that's all they do when they are deployed. So they don't have to worry about making their beds. They don't have to worry about cooking their food. They don't have to worry about grocery shopping. They don't have to worry about putting gas in the car. If their mission is to go out and walk or watch the perimeter, the truck is there, the ammo is there, the gas is there. They just go. They come back and there's a hot meal waiting for them. Because I have never deployed, or soldiers when they do deploy, then they come back and they have to start taking into account real life as well as just doing their mission. They have trouble adjusting. So one of the perks of not being deployed, I guess, is that I've gone to work, I've come home at 6 o'clock and put gas in the car and cooked dinner, so I didn't have a huge readjustment factor.
Okay, I know that there was a time when you almost were to be deployed and you almost had to go overseas. Do you want to elaborate on that at all?
When my unit was tasked to provide soldiers to go over to Kuwait to help with the transition between soldiers moving from the States into Iraq. And it was a year-long deployment. And what they had done is they had tasked 10 soldiers. They had 10 spots they needed to fill. And they had identified those 10 soldiers. The pre-mobilization training, the Army brings between 15 and 20 soldiers on that training in case one of the top 10 drop out for any reason, whether they fail the training or they're medically not qualified. So I was on the bench is what they called it. I was number 11 through 20. So I went through all the pre-deployment training and thankfully never had to deploy.
Okay. What are some life lessons you learned from military service?
One of the biggest things I've learned from the military is to accept responsibility for your actions. It doesn't matter what you do or what rank you are or what role you're given a job, you have your mission, and not accomplishing it and making excuses just sets you further and further back. And it's much easier to say, you're right, I screwed up, I didn't do it right, I didn't do it on time, and work to make it better rather than try to cover it up. The soldiers that don't accept responsibility end up losing the support of their teammates. They end up losing the respect from their chain of command, and that I would say would be the biggest life lesson.
Okay, how has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
My military service, I am proud of my military service, and I mean, Bridget can laugh at this. I don't consider myself a fighter necessarily. As I said, I've never been deployed. I have been in the training arena and have supported troops from the back end. Because I have not been to war, I don't know if it's a fair statement for me to judge on that. I know I've seen friends return, and they've returned as different people. I know that they believe in what they were doing, so I have to support them as the best I can.
How do you feel about the military after being involved in it?
Like I said, I'm proud. The military has given me a lot over the past. I've been in for over 24 years. I mentioned I had an ROTC scholarship. I went to a college. I went to Dartmouth. It was $60,000 a year, and I paid $10,000 for all 4 years because the Army picked up the rest of it. I went active duty when friends of mine were having trouble finding a job out of school. I had an active duty assignment, so I went to Texas. It wasn't New York like I wanted, but Texas isn't a bad place to be for a couple of years, but it was a guaranteed employment. It gave me skills and it gave me connections. I've been in the reserves ever since, apart from a 3-year active duty stint that I was at Arlington Heights for. So still local, not deployed overseas. The financial support, the education, the Army, the military as a whole is a big fan of promoting education. And there's education milestones that every soldier must go through, regardless of rank, that either improve you in your job specifically, or that you need as part of basic leadership training to get better, or additional schools to learn additional skills, some more combat related, like sniper training. There's medical training, there's even resiliency training to help the soldiers that return. So the fact that the Army has provided a lifelong opportunity for education and self-improvement, I've appreciated as well.
You were just talking about the resiliency training. I know you were involved with that for some time. Do you want to talk about your experience with that?
The Army does a great job of building up soldiers physically and developing them with their skills. They can shoot, they can run, they can move, they can communicate, they can fix trucks. The Army has done a great job of that for so long, but it's noticed that over the past 10, 15 years with the increased combat and the back-to-back deployments that many soldiers are facing, that even though their bodies are prepared for war, their minds are not. So they've instituted a lot of resiliency training that they force, mandatory training. They force all soldiers, regardless of rank, to receive this training quarterly to help develop their coping techniques, to learn how to put problems in perspective, to help deal with anxious thoughts, to help calm themselves down, help recognize warning signs if you are feeling suicidal or feeling stressed. I went to the resiliency training course and then spent about 2 years working with groups of soldiers returning from combat and helping them, teaching them some of these skills and working with them through the warning signs of post-traumatic stress disorder and helping them adjust to coming back to the United States and adjust to civilian living.
What would you say is your fondest memory of being in the military?
There's a lot. Meeting Sergeant Tace for the first time, that will always stick out in my mind. I remember another one of my fondest memories, again with Sergeant Tace. It was our first field problem, and we were preparing for an National Training Center rotation, which was 30 days in the field. And it involved a lot of night moves, and we'd go and at 10 o'clock at night, you'd break down all your equipment and break down your perimeter, break down all the tents, pile it up, move 10 miles down the road, set it all back up again within 3 hours. And so we're on one of these night jumps, and it had been maybe our third night in a row. Sleep was at a premium. Everyone was a little grouchy. And he was driving, we're moving in the Humvee through the desert, no lights, and he starts singing Proud Mary. And he's being Ike Turner. And I start chiming in. I became Tina Turner. And I don't sing nearly as well as Tina Turner. Although he did have the Ike part down pat. He was good with that rolling on the river part. But to this day, I hear Proud Mary and I think of driving through the desert with Sergeant Tace in the middle of the night.
Are you still in contact with him?
Yes. As I said, we trade emails and Christmas cards. It's fun.
That's good. So I know you've had civilian jobs like outside of the military. How do you think your military experience, or like how is that different than your civilian jobs?
In the military, everybody wears their name and their rank on their uniform, so you know exactly who you're dealing with. And it is what I found the most difficult part in the civilian world is that people don't have name tags on it. There's no identifier as to who they are or what they are. So when you're looking for help or working in a group to solve a problem or you're assigned to a project, you can't just look at the room and know that this person is the money person or this person is plans or this person is HR or what level of responsibility or abilities that they have. And the military is very drawn out as to who does what and what role they play. In the civilian world, it's a little tricky going back and forth. Also in the civilian world, I've noticed that there is not as much emphasis on progression with the Army. Like I mentioned, the continuous education, up and out was a policy. If you didn't get promoted within a certain number of years or time and grade, you would be forced out. In some cases, that's still in effect for certain MOSs, for certain jobs specialties. But in the civilian world, you can do the same job for 15 years and never get additional education opportunities, never get promoted, never have that opportunity to try for new responsibilities or new experiences. Whereas in the military, it's pretty much forced on you every couple of years.
I guess like for like stereotypes of military, you only really think of those to like fight in the war. What other positions or opportunities are there for people who may not be like as physically strong, or but who still want to be involved?
The combatants, they get all the glory, and they deserve it. But every soldier, I mean, is trained in basic warrior tasks and combat skills. But in terms of actual fighting percentages, the fighting MOSs are specialties are smaller than the support. For every soldier that is fighting, there is somebody who is accountable for the logistics, getting them there, the transportation, get their vehicles once they're there, getting them from the States into the theater, getting the food there, getting the equipment there, maintaining that equipment, maintenance officers, logistics, transportation. Within the HR world, paying soldiers, making sure they're medically safe, medically qualified to go and deployed, and what happens if they do get hurt. Taking care of soldiers that way. So in terms of you don't have to be a combatant, you don't have to be a combat arms infantry guy to still be successful in the Army and still contribute. One of the cool things about the military, they knock you down and then build you back up again. And when you go to your training, your basic training is all soldiers all together. But as you go on to your advanced training, it is by your branch. So the infantry guys, who are the most vocal, come out and say, well, you can't win a war if I don't shoot anybody, which is true. But when you go to the transportation corps training, they come out so gung-ho saying, well, you can't win a war if you can't get there. And you have the medical service saying, well, you can't win a war if you die or if you don't have your flu vaccinations and you're not fed and you're not physically fit, you're healthy. So each branch of the service, or within each branch, each occupational area, they have such pride in what they do because each is vital to the overall effort.
I know there's like a lot of support between like the different branches, like the Army, Navy. Can you talk about that more? Like the Army, Navy football games and like relationships between branches?
The current environment has become very much a joint environment. So there is supposedly a lot of cooperation between all the different forces. And the way that the National Defense works, I mean, it's designed so that they all cooperate together. If World War III broke out tomorrow and all 5 branches had to come together to work to fight, the Marines' job is to go make a foothold on the opposing territory, to get there, to get a foothold, and Marines are only supposed to stay in combat once they get their foothold on the island or on the land for no more than 72 hours. That is their training. They come into the new battle zone, they establish a foothold, and then they leave. They stay there for the 72 hours. Behind the Marines comes the Army with the land forces. They take that foothold that the Marines have established, and then they expand upon it. They bring in all the combat service support. They bring in the transportation. They bring in the additional resources. And they take and move the fight forward. The Air Force supports from the air, obviously. The Navy supports from the seas. And the Coast Guard is supposed to do homeland security. So that's how all the 5 groups work together. There is There's rivalries between them, like the Army-Navy football game that you mentioned. If any of you have a patriotic spirit, watching the Army-Navy football game is an amazing thing to go and see. The cadets all have to stand throughout the entire game. There's chants and cheers back and forth about, Army is greater, Navy is greater. They do a prisoner exchange, and they take students from Annapolis and from West Point, and they have pulled them out the month before the game and make them go down to the opposing school. And at the actual football game, they march them across the 50-yard line and make this big production about returning their prisoners now that they've been indoctrinated into the other culture. So there's a lot of good rivalry between the services, but because of the nature of the enemy that we face now, when push comes to shove, it is a joint, good working relationship.
If you had the chance to do it, would you want to join a different branch?
Can't say that. I've got to go Army. The Air Force has great opportunities. The Air Force has good opportunities for people leaving the Air Force in terms of finding jobs within the civilian world. They've got a great transition program. But as a career soldier, I like the Army.
I know you're not active duty anymore, but how are you involved in the Army now?
Right now, I am a battalion commander for a training support battalion that's based out of Milwaukee. I have 3 companies of soldiers. I'm responsible for almost 200 soldiers. Within the 3 companies, what they do is, as a training support battalion, is we augment the basic training camps when initial entry soldiers, when young students such as yourself, when you enlist at 18 and you go to your basic training, it is my soldiers that augment the active duty folks in terms of providing that training, running the lanes training. They do a lot of engineer training. So I have a group of instructors that can teach you how to build a bridge and then bomb it. And so they will go down to Fort Leonard Wood for 2 weeks and work with the incoming privates, teach them their engineering skills, and then the reservists go home, and then another team of reservists would come in and backfill to teach the trainees a different set of skills, depending on what their MOS was.
Okay. What advice would you give to people who are considering entering the military?
It is not a commitment to take lightly. I think that it is a wonderful opportunity. I am very patriotic. I grew up living overseas and moving every couple of years, and so I've seen firsthand what other countries are like, and for as upset as you may be sometimes within our own country and the opportunities that are there for us, in the grand scheme of things, we do have a lot to be proud of by being Americans. And as cheesy as that sounds, I do fully believe that. It is almost our duty, I feel, to give back in some way, whether it's not through joining the service, but through either Peace Corps or Habitat for Humanity, to do something to help promote and make this country even better. By joining the service, it is an excellent opportunity to meet people from all over the country, to work with different people from different backgrounds. It's a way to give back. And that's on the patriotic side. On the practical side, for those of you that want to go to college, it's easy money. Between ROTC scholarships or the GI Bill or the Montgomery Bill, however you choose to do it, it's an excellent way to finance your college education, so you're not coming out with a ton of debt. And it also gives you a head up on anybody looking for a job once you get out of college, because you will have had some basic leadership and you will have had some basic training and opportunities that will set you above your peers when it comes time to find a job if you don't go active duty and do the reserve route instead.
You said you met a lot of different people from different backgrounds to the military. Is there any people who really stand out to you that you would never really have talked to them at all unless it was through the military?
In terms of people from different backgrounds, I became great friends with a barbecue chef from Mississippi. And when you live in New Jersey, there's not a whole lot of barbecue, number one, because it's seafood or it's New York pizza that you dream about. So that was an opportunity. In terms of different backgrounds, because I moved around a lot growing up, I was exposed to a lot. But working with soldiers from Puerto Rico, working with cowboys from Wyoming, a completely different take. Just simple things such as perspective on drive times. I remember I was working with one soldier who would drive 5 hours and think that was a close commute. To go to work, to go to battle assembly, to go to drill, it was a 5-hour drive. But in Wyoming, everything is far away and spread out. Whereas to us, you think 5 hours, I better be in Ohio by then if I'm going to drive 5 hours. So simple things just made a difference. In terms of background versus rural or urban backgrounds, education levels were different. Everybody sticks out as being different and unique to me, but it's been very eye-opening.
What would you say Veterans Day means to you?
Veterans Day is an opportunity to thank the soldiers or the service members that you come into contact with. I think something that gets lost in Veterans Day is that everyone makes a big deal about the sacrifices that the service members have made. But what needs to be remembered is that their families, they couldn't do it without their families. And I think that the families should be recognized as well. Service members miss a lot of birthdays. They miss a lot of events. They couldn't do it without the support of their families. It's much harder to do without the support of your families. So when you thank a veteran, if you know somebody whose family has served, thank them as well, because they've made a lot of sacrifices to allow their service member to be successful.
Speaking of family, I know your dad and your brother also both served in the military. Do you think that influenced you at all when you were deciding whether or not to go into it?
As I said, we grew up living overseas. My father worked for the Department of Commerce, so even though he played the tuba in the marching band for 2 years, again, not one of those positions that are very important because it improves morale, but he couldn't shoot the side of a barn if life depended on it. He was in the Army band, but we grew up within the diplomatic community and within the international community where military service across the board was encouraged. I joined the Army looking for scholarship money. I mean, I will admit that. My younger brother now did the same. He is also a lieutenant colonel in the Army, and even though he's my younger brother, because he has more active duty time, we're equal in rank now. You get promoted faster in active duty than you do in the reserves. But now it's kind of a little competition between us as to who's going to hit on 06 first, who will make full bird first. But the family ties are important. And you notice within soldiers that many people who enlist now, many people who join do have a family connection. I think it's something that you are raised with, that you have that pride and that desire to give back.
So you're still in the Army now. Do you have plans for what you would like to do once you get out of the Army?
I'm never going to run again. Even at the Army, no matter what rank you are, what level, you're still your common warrior tasks that you need to be proficient in. You still have to go to the range. You still have to shoot, which I think is fun. You still have to be able to run 2 miles in a certain time, which I will admit I do not think is fun. So upon retirement, I can see myself not exercising nearly as much. Upon retirement, I'd also would like to get involved in more of the support. The VA has a lot of outreach programs to help soldiers that are having trouble readjusting, kind of to carry on what I did with the Yellow Ribbon program, to work with that, to take my experience and my knowledge of the resources that are out there to help returning soldiers as they're facing difficulties.
Okay. Is there anything that you would like to talk about pertaining to the military at all? Or you can choose this question. Like just something you think is important that you'd like to talk about.
How much time do you have?
10 minutes.
I remember my initial entry training, and in terms of sizing everybody up, when you get into a military group, and it still happens, I mean, at all levels. I've been working with senior officers to junior enlisted. When you get into a group with the military, people size you up very quickly as to what you bring to the table, what skills you bring to the table. And it behooves you, if you're going into the military, if you're working with military people, to put it out there, to lay out what you are good at and what you are not good at. Put your strengths out there. Teams are formed quickly, first opinions are formed quickly, and because within the military, nobody succeeds by themselves. Every operation is a group effort, it is a team effort. So being able to work with people, being able to work with other different people from yourself, from different backgrounds, being able to establish that trust and that sense of responsibility and to know that you can depend on them, that is key within any military organization. The whole Band of Brothers and the movies that you see, there is a tie that you do feel with other service members. Part of it is developed. I mean, those of you that are on varsity sports teams, you'll be best friends with your athletes because you've gone through the morning practices and the grueling 2-a-day football practices in 100-degree heat. You go through that misery, and the guy next to you is your best friend because he survived that misery with you. So you have that camaraderie, that bond within just fellow service members. But taking it one step further and having that trust and confidence in them, I think that goes a long way. That's what makes the service special.
Would you say that your friends from the military service are significantly different than your friends just in your personal life?
I've noticed, especially being in the reserve component, that my military friends understand me at a level different than my civilian friends. We speak the same language. We have a similar, even though some have been deployed, some have not. We've been in different units all throughout the country and overseas. There's still that common thread that ties us together. There are still things that, I guess, a simple word that you can say that everybody in the military would understand that a civilian wouldn't and have that same response. It does tie you together, and when you see the organizations like the VFW and the organizations that retired service members join, it is because there's that bond there that can't be broken.
Okay, so while this interview is being recorded, is there any message you'd like to leave for future generations who might hear this interview about your experience for yourself?
Embrace the experience. The military can be so wonderful. You hear so much in the news is the bad stuff about the military because that's what sells magazines and that's what sells the media is the scandalous part. But there are so many positive aspects to joining the service. Apart from the opportunities it allows you to develop and to improve your own self-esteem, as well as the people that you meet, the friendships that you make, and that bond you have with others. So if you have, embrace the opportunity.
Okay, well, I'm pretty much out of questions here, so do you have any final words?
I have nothing. If you have any questions that I could answer.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Leah looks at people with hate. Yeah.
I'm also doing something last hour, so can I stay the last hour? 2, 3, 4.